It's time for some body-snatching paranoia in Antarctica. It's time for John Carpenter's The Thing. Let me tell you why I think this movie is good. There's some problems with it, but overall it's had such a lasting impact. People still watch it, cultural influence, and I just watched it and I kind of like it. So let me talk about that coming up next. All right, John Carpenter's The Thing is actually a remake of the 1950s Hollywood movie by Howard Hawks, the great director, The Thing from Another World. And that's based on a John W. Campbell short story entitled Who Goes There? Arguably, Carpenter's The Thing is closer to the original short story, to the creepiness, to many of the themes. And as I'll argue, it actually borrows a couple of key artistic points and even structural details that are in that great short story, which I use in a science fiction class to talk about actually biological paranoia arising out of Darwinism coming up in the 1930s. And it's kind of a social Darwinist text, but it's also just a plain science fiction text about what if we find, spoiler alert, what if we find aliens buried somewhere under Earth's surface, unearth them, and then that organism, the biological life, whatever it is, comes to life. Now, Campbell's original short story does hint at the fact that humans are very vulnerable to, on the one hand, things they don't know or understand. So scientifically, we're actually at a loss, usually, for things that may actually harm us. And the example would be viral institutions a la all over the place, the CDC, the Wuhan labs in China, and so on and so forth, that study viruses, bacteria, and may actually be creating something that could ultimately kill us. That sort of thing is in part what The Thing could be about. But it's also about the possibility of unearthing ancient viruses or finding viruses somewhere on the earth, not just viruses, but bacteria or parasites that could harm us. And then, of course, the scientifically plausible, though it's never happened one time, but still the plausibility is there, of some kind of alien life, not aliens as in beings like us, but viruses or bacteria, small organisms coming and infecting us. In the case of The Thing, of course, it's an infectious thing with a gigantic organism, and it's hard even to tell what the thing is in The Thing, so that's one thing that makes it interesting. It's sort of a movie about all kinds of biological possibilities that could harm humans who are fairly incapable of protecting themselves. The movie is clearly a riff on Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien, coming out in the late 1970s. It's got the same vibe, sometimes the same pacing. It is, of course, a secluded and enclosed location with a few people being picked off one by one by a creature they don't understand. That, of course, is Alien. So I encourage you to read the short story Who Goes There and then look at what The Thing is doing. I find that in the short story there are a lot of big gaps, and John W. Campbell has these sections, and in between the sections are things you don't know what happens, and that happens in the movie with probably 5 to 10 fades to black. Each time the movie fades to black, a useful transition for Carpenter here, you will find that it's jumping ahead in time and jumping across space a little bit somewhere else. It's going somewhere else on the base. And it indicates we don't know what's happening in between these time jumps that are fades to black. One of them, of course, is when the dog, who we know it's infected early in the movie, goes into the room of somebody, and you think you can kind of tell who the person is, the shadow on the wall, but it is ambiguous, I think. It's maybe 3 or 4 different guys. But that fade to black there indicates that the dog, as the thing, may have infected one of the men, and really early on in the movie, before the dog goes into the dog cage and shows itself as a thing and maybe has infected other dogs, the human population has already been infected. A thing has taken over and imitated a human being. In other words, the humans are already being infected and infiltrated long before they even know what the heck is going on. Again, one of the parallels here is viruses and epidemics, pandemics in real life, as humans are clueless usually about these sorts of things until well into them. And in the case of a lot of viruses and bacteria and pandemics, clueless for centuries and millennia about what causes them, even as we know with, say, the bubonic plague, people just simply didn't know what that was. They knew that it caused disease, they knew it could spread, but they didn't know exactly what it was or where it came from. And so that sort of gap in the knowledge of human beings, and here scientists on a lab station in Antarctica, is important for this movie in a sort of doubting or skeptical sort of way, a skeptical stance toward science in general or human beings in small groups doing some kind of scientific research. They will not understand what they come across, and whatever they seek to know first may annihilate them. That sort of science fiction skepticism, I find, comes certainly even very early on in science fiction, whether it's Gulliver's Travels or Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, but certainly after 1945, the building of the atomic bomb by nuclear physicists, the use of it in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, sort of doubts about what science is capable of destroying us or annihilating us, or being incapable of understanding what it studies, comes up and populates science fiction, both in literature and film, since 1945, as I said, though before it, and that's certainly is seeping into The Thing. And of course, one of the cultural background and scientific backgrounds here is discovery of, say, Ice Age creatures or ancient humans in ice, both the mountains and perhaps in Siberia and Antarctica and those sorts of places, unearthing them, what's going to happen if, something comes from that. And you can even see articles today about ancient viruses being found. What's going to happen if those viruses get out and become active? That is kind of what's going on in The Thing, although, of course, The Thing is about aliens coming to the planet Earth. This movie invites all sorts of interpretations because we simply don't know, and we're invited to be as paranoid as the men in the movie and as paranoid as anything. I'm sure there's even a viewing of this or plausible interpretations that accuse MCCReady, the Kurt Russell character, of being a thing since the very beginning of the movie or near it, and he is undermining his own other things. I have no doubt that is possible to read, and you can probably read any human character in the movie as being a thing. Now, what I find really interesting then is Roger Ebert's 2.5-star original 1982 review, in which he reads this as a literary critic might, or as a humanist critic might. He criticizes the movie as having no rich and complex human characters. The movie doesn't even dive into their backgrounds, their motivations, why they do what they do, their beliefs. There's nothing but two-dimensional characters in this movie, and we only really know them by their last names. Now, often I criticize movies for not also having well-rounded 3 or 4 or 10-dimensional characters. Flat characters usually are no good, but sometimes there are good reasons to have flat characters, I find. And also, if you want to just ignore your judgment of whether a movie should or shouldn't have flat characters, you can analyze it and say, it has flat characters, so why and what does that mean? Now, with two-dimensional characters in The Thing, that means we should be more concerned about what's going on behind the scenes, the gaps, what if the thing gets out into the real world, and what does this mean applied to the real world, I think, than who these characters are and what they mean and getting into their personal lives. As well, any of them could be imitations of other people, and that is one interesting concern with body snatching sorts of movies like this, is that anybody could be an NPC, a fake person, an imitation of somebody else, not real, not genuine, manipulative. The concerns of a body snatching movie is to be wary of all those kinds of possibilities for other people, strangers, or even people you think you know. And so it heightens the viewer's attention to that sort of topic or problem. And with the flat characters, all of them could be just that. And so you can read onto each one of their faces that they're fake, they're imitations of the real thing, they're NPCs, and so on and so forth. And you can believe that none of them are human beings, really. I think this is also highlighted by the fact that each time I see this movie, I just plain don't remember who anybody is. I don't remember what their names are. McCready is the only one, and the Wilford Brimley character, who I can kind of sort of know who they are and what they do, but everybody else is kind of this generic, bland character. And with 10 to 15 different guys in this movie, I find that's really effective in creating sort of a mass effect, that the cast feels like a mass or group of people rather than as unique individuals that the movie is trying to sort of sort out as unique individuals. And that's an interesting effect that a director or video maker may use. And Carpenter, I think, does that quite well here, highlighting the alienness of the thing over and against the individuality of any human being. Arguably, then, the thing is this is what I'm getting at. The thing itself is more unique, awesome, worth studying, worth looking at, worth thinking about than any of the humans in this movie. And the question is, okay, why would this movie try to get us to that point and want us to think about aliens rather than human beings? Are we in an era in which the masses are of no concern to us and things beyond the human or other than the human are more interesting? I think that comes up in zombie movies for sure, where the zombies are just hordes of humans and none of them are particular individuals, and we shouldn't care about the zombies at all. We should get rid of them. Of course, George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, for example, coming out 2 or 3 years before this movie, it has a similar kind of thing going on in it. I'd also like to use just a few minutes here to analyze a brief scene. It's actually an introduction to McCready's character, and it's quite interesting, I find, because I am doubtful of McCready, even though he's sort of a Norwegian or Nordic hero in the original short story by John W. Campbell. The first time we see McCready, we get this very close, tight shot of him. It happens all over the movie, actually, and it's the uncomfortable space between us, the viewer, the camera, and him that makes us, I think, wary of him at first. And certainly the movie uses this kind of thing all over the place for characters we're supposed to doubt or be uncertain of. He's playing a computer game. He's playing Chess Wizard, and it would seem to indicate that he might be a chess wizard. But one of the funny things in this movie is that the men aren't that intelligent about how to go about eliminating the thing from their lives. And McCready gets confident and cocky, but he misses an obvious checkmate that the computer gives him in one move. Then he takes his alcohol and dumps it into the computer. Not the sort of thing I would be doing in Antarctica if I had to spend the whole winter in Antarctica. McCready is alcoholic, perhaps. It signals the men's boredom and loneliness, but it also brings up the fact that he's the one who's going to be playing with fire and destroying things throughout the movie. He's, in fact, the main agent of destruction. And once we get to the end, where he says, let's wait it out after he's destroyed everything, maybe as the men hypothesize in the movie, the thing is trying to freeze itself in order to be unthawed or thawed when the rescue crew shows up. And McCready or somebody else may be doing just that. In other words, I think if we watch this movie carefully, we should probably doubt nearly everybody throughout the movie. Of course, there's a blood test given. Should that be doubted or not? Has the blood been faked or not? Is it a genuine? Is the test working? Who knows, right? That's the doubting of science and the scientific method that this movie brings up. And by the end, guess what? The actual base, in fact, 2 bases have been destroyed in this movie. A metaphor, perhaps, for our trust in people and social circumstances, maybe in the scientific method or science in general. And I say that because the station itself as a scientific station may represent, if you want to take it this way, science itself. And so overall, The Thing is perhaps one of the best remakes ever, certainly compared to its original movie. And I think video makers, movie makers who want to remake something ought to study the difference between The Thing from Another World by Howard Hawks and this movie to see how they can get a big difference in vision and how they can improve on originals. And I am a fan of originals being remade if the movie makers think hard about how to make them better, because a template has already been set up for you. you should be able to improve on the template, and if you don't, you're just wasting our time and money. That brings me to the question what your favorite remakes are and why, for this particular movie, you might like it, or what problems you have with it. And I think there are many, many problems with the movie. So let's have a discussion in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.